The question that breaks everything. Let's start with the question nobody wants to ask. If he loves her, why would he risk losing her? Why destroy the very thing he says matters most? Why shatter the trust, the safety, the shared history, the late-night conversations, the private jokes, the intimacy that took years to build? Why gamble something sacred for something temporary? It doesn't make sense, and that's exactly why it hurts so deeply. Because betrayal would be easier to understand if love were absent, if he never cared, if it was all fake, if the relationship meant nothing, if every "I love you" was just a performance. Pain is cleaner when it's simple, but what makes this unbearable is something far more complicated. Sometimes he does love her, and he still cheats. That contradiction is what breaks everything. It shakes your understanding of reality. It makes you question your judgment. It makes you wonder if love itself can even be trusted. We grow up believing something simple, clean, binary. If he cheats, he never loved you. It's a comforting belief. It protects us from complexity. It shields us from psychological discomfort. It allows us to place people into categories, good or bad, loyal or disloyal, loving or heartless. It gives us control. Because if cheating equals no love, then the world makes sense again. But real psychology doesn't work in binaries. Human beings are not that simple. A man can love a woman deeply and still betray her. Not because his love was a lie, not because he woke up one day and stopped caring, but because love alone does not make a person whole. And this is where things get uncomfortable. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries a hidden side, what he called the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It's not some dark villain living inside us. It's simply the part of us we learned to hide. The parts that were judged, the parts that were shamed, the parts that felt unacceptable, the parts that were told, that's not who you're supposed to be. Our insecurity, our need for validation, our hunger for admiration, our fear of being ordinary, our suppressed desires, our quiet resentments, our unspoken fantasies, our envy, our ego, our craving to feel powerful. From a young age, we are taught which parts of us are good and which parts are too much. Boys are taught to be strong, to win, to perform, to achieve, to never look weak. So when vulnerability shows up, it gets buried. When insecurity shows up, it gets masked. When fear of insignificance shows up, it gets denied. And slowly we build an identity, what Jung called the persona, the strong one, the loyal one, the responsible one, the faithful partner, the man who has it all together. Love lives in that conscious identity. It's sincere, it's intentional, it's real. He means it when he says he loves her. He feels it when he holds her. He believes it when he promises forever. But the shadow doesn't disappear just because we fall in love. It doesn't dissolve because someone chooses us. It waits in the background, quiet, patient. Cheating rarely begins with a decision in a bedroom. It begins with a conversation inside the mind, a whisper that says, "Are you still desired? Are you still powerful? Are you still impressive? Are you still enough?" If those questions go unanswered for too long, they don't fade, they grow louder. They turn into subtle restlessness, into boredom that feels heavier than it should, into sensitivity to attention, into ego that reacts too strongly to praise. And here's the truth most people avoid. What we refuse to confront within ourselves eventually confronts our relationships. If a man has never faced his fear of being insignificant, his craving for validation, his anxiety about aging, status, or worth, his terror of becoming invisible, then love will not automatically heal those wounds. It may temporarily soothe them, it may quiet them for a season, but unhealed insecurity is patient. It waits for opportunity. It waits for admiration at the wrong time, for temptation during a vulnerable moment, for ego-stroking attention when his confidence dips. And when that moment arrives, the shadow steps forward, not because he stopped loving her, but because he never fully understood himself, because he never learned to separate his self-worth from external applause, because he never integrated the parts of himself he was ashamed of. That's the question that breaks everything. Not did he love her, but was he whole enough to protect what he loved? Because love requires more than emotion. It requires self-awareness. It requires emotional discipline. It requires confronting the parts of yourself that could sabotage what you cherish. And without that, even real love, sincere love, can collapse under the weight of an unexamined shadow. The hidden hunger. He doesn't cheat because he doesn't care. He cheats because something inside him is starving. And the most dangerous part, he doesn't even know what to call hunger. From the outside, it looks simple: lust, temptation, weakness. But underneath that surface is something far more complicated. Some men cheat because they crave validation, not sex, validation, to feel wanted, chosen, desired without responsibility, admired without pressure, seen without expectation. In the beginning of love, he feels heroic, powerful, magnetic, important. He is chosen, he is pursued, he is affirmed. There's excitement in being someone's focus. There's energy in being admired. There's confidence in knowing you are desired. But over time, relationships evolve. Passion matures into stability. Intensity softens into comfort. And routine quietly takes over. Bills, responsibilities, conversations about the future, familiarity replacing mystery. None of these are bad. In fact, they are signs of depth. But for a man who secretly doubts his worth, stability won't calm him. It will expose him, expose the fear he's been outrunning, the fear of becoming invisible, average, predictable, replaceable. When admiration fades into normalcy, he may interpret it as loss, not because she stopped loving him, but because he tied his identity to being impressive. So when another woman shows interest, it doesn't just flatter him, it awakens him. It feeds something fragile, a wound he has carried long before this relationship ever began. Attention becomes oxygen, a text message becomes proof, a lingering look becomes reassurance. And for a divided man, oxygen feels like survival. He may go home and still kiss his partner, still care for her, still say, "I love you," and mean it. But if his sense of self depends on external admiration, he will keep chasing applause instead of building self-worth. And this is where the internal split begins: the loyal partner and the reckless seeker, the man who values commitment and the man who fears insignificance. If that reckless part is buried instead of understood, it doesn't disappear. It waits, it watches, it looks for moments of weakness, stress, boredom, insecurity, ego bruises. Suppression doesn't create strength, it creates pressure. And when opportunity meets suppression, when validation appears at the exact moment his self-esteem dips, betrayal happens. Not because love disappeared, not because she wasn't enough, but because he was never taught how to be enough for himself, because integration never happened. He never learned to sit with insecurity without trying to soothe it externally. He never learned to validate himself without needing applause. So instead of confronting hunger, he feeds it, temporarily. And temporary relief feels powerful until the consequences arrive. This is the tragedy of the divided man. He can love deeply and still self-sabotage, because without inner wholeness, even real love is competing with wounds that were never healed, and unhealed wounds are always louder than promises. The divided man. Cheating is often an escape, not escape from her, escape from himself, from the pressure of expectations, from the weight of responsibility, from the silent fear of not measuring up, from the image he feels forced to maintain every single day: the provider, the strong one, the dependable one, the man who has it all together. For a few hours, that image disappears, and in its place, he becomes someone else, less responsible, less burdened, less watched, less controlled. No expectations, no performance, no emotional accountability, just desire. And that identity shift feels intoxicating. It feels like freedom. It feels like relief. That's why some men say afterward, "I don't know why I did it."
And sometimes they're telling the truth, because consciously they didn't wake up planning to destroy their relationship. They didn't sit down and calculate the damage. They didn't think, today I will break the heart of the woman I love. But unconsciously, they were chasing relief. Relief from stress, relief from self-doubt, relief from the quiet anxiety of not feeling enough. Many men were never taught how to process emotion in healthy ways. They were taught, be strong, don't cry, don't admit fear, don't show weakness, don't talk about insecurity, handle it yourself. So they grow up emotionally armored. But armor doesn't remove emotion, it traps it. So instead of expressing loneliness, they distract themselves. Instead of admitting insecurity, they chase validation. Instead of saying, I feel lost, they seek something that makes them feel powerful again. Instead of confronting inner emptiness, they try to fill it. Sometimes with work, sometimes with ambition, sometimes with status, sometimes with attention, sometimes with another woman. The affair becomes a temporary anesthetic, a way to feel alive again, a way to feel chosen again, a way to feel desired without the weight of responsibility. At that moment, he's not thinking about the consequences. He's thinking about sensation. Escape doesn't require logic. It only requires opportunity. And when emotional suppression meets opportunity, coping mechanisms activate. Cheating becomes one of them, an unhealthy one, a destructive one, but a coping mechanism nonetheless. Now let's be clear, understanding is not an excuse. Explaining behavior does not justify it. Betrayal still breaks trust. It fractures safety. It hurts deeply. It creates trauma that can echo for years. And there must always be accountability. But here's the hard truth most people avoid. Love does not automatically heal unresolved wounds. Commitment does not silence insecurity. Devotion does not eliminate the shadow. You can genuinely love someone and still be emotionally unequipped to protect that love. Because love is a feeling. Wholeness is a skill. A man who cheats on the woman he loves is not always heartless, but he is divided. Divided between who he wants to be and who he secretly fears he is. Divided between loyalty and validation. Divided between commitment and escape. And a divided man is dangerous. Not because he doesn't care, but because he hasn't mastered himself. He hasn't learned to sit with discomfort without running from it. He hasn't learned to validate himself without seeking applause. He hasn't faced the parts of himself that feel inadequate, small, or afraid. Real loyalty isn't just loving someone. It's integrating the parts of yourself you're afraid to face. It's confronting insecurity before it turns into betrayal. It's choosing growth over ego. It's choosing self-awareness over impulse. And until a man does that, love alone is not enough. Because without inner discipline, even sincere love can collapse under the weight of an unexamined self.